Hello, everybody, and welcome to Grimwit with Dimwits. I'm T.
And I'm Blondie.
And welcome to our wild and crazy month of April.
No. It's double A. If you're going to do it right. Remember Asinine, Absurd, Airheaded April?
Wild and crazy, I thought covered it, but we'll go with double A.
I spent minutes making that up.
I know. I'm sorry. You took minutes out of your life for that.
I might have even been in the bathroom at the time. I don't know.
TMI. Speaking of Asinine, did you hear that O.J. Simpson passed away a few days ago?
I did. I was surprised.
I was a little surprised, too. I think he was only 76 years old. Way too young, but hey, not for a killer.
No, not at all. And I did not realize he had cancer.
I didn't either.
I think that's why I was surprised.
Yeah, I was surprised because he did seem a little bit too young to be dying. But, you know, what goes around comes around. And at least he wasn't murdered.
Very true. And after that trial, I do remember the statement that he made after he was acquitted, that he was going to stop at nothing to find the real killer. Like, dude, go look in the mirror.
That whole trial was such a joke. It was sad. It was sad because, you know what, I really was a fan of his when he was playing football. I thought he was pretty awesome. And, you know, even doing his little, what was it, Hertz car commercials? I think it was Hertz. He was just awesome. So when this all happened, it's like, who are you? Who is this guy?
I don't know. But we don't really have to worry about it anymore.
No, we don't. I wish he had a deathbed confession, though. That's the least he could have done.
Oh, absolutely. But, you know, it's his reputation. Even though he's gone, it's still his reputation. He's not going to confess.
True. I guess if that's all he had to take with him, enjoy it.
And I think he's broke at that point. So probably.
All right. We're going to quit bashing Orenthal James Simpson. He did that pretty well all by himself.
He didn't need any help.
No, he didn't. He didn't need our help. So long, OJ.
Bye-bye.
All right, Miss Blondie, what story do you have for us today?
So this story had a movie based off of a true story and definitely falls under the absurd category. I watched Lifetime's How to Murder Your Husband by Nancy Crampton. I don't know why I always want to say Crampton like that. Nancy Crampton Brody.
That's quite a name.
She doesn't use Crampton. She's just Nancy Brophy, but her full name is Crampton.
Neither one of those names are very feminine. Crampton and Brophy.
Well, come on. She married into one. What are you going to do?
That's true.
The movie starred Sybil Shepherd and Steve Guttenberg. Now, do you remember Moonlighting with Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis?
I do remember that show, and I loved Bruce, but I never could get into Sybil. She was like a real misfit for that part, if you ask me. There was just something about her face. I just didn't like it.
I was talking to my husband about this, and he said that even during Moonlighting, they always had to soften her face. It's funny that you brought that up.
Well, maybe that's what made it look so weird. There's just something off about her.
This movie doesn't do her justice either. So the movie piqued my interest about Nancy and basically what was actually true and what was the dramatization for television. I looked into it and thought, I will share what I found. Nancy Crampton was born on June 16, 1950, in Wichita Falls, Texas, where she was raised. She attended and graduated from the University of Houston. During her time at university, she wrote a pamphlet that was her first published work called Between Your Navel and Your Knees.
Ooh, quite controversial to write a book about the gravity of aging and sagging boobs back then.
Okay, it's between your navel and your knees.
That's right about where they end up. Yes, I'm right there with you.
Okay, it was about the changing morals of sexuality in the 60s and 70s, but there is definitely nothing left to the imagination by that title. She did enjoy writing, but most of the writing she had done at that time was nonfiction and technical writing. But in 1993, she moved to Oregon where she met Daniel Brophy. Daniel was born June 17th, 1954 in Valley City, North Dakota. Nancy liked herself a younger man.
Oh, don't we all?
There was a story we used to say about that, but I'll keep it to myself.
Now we all want to know.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Whatever. You're a tease.
I am. Daniel was working as an instructor at Le Cordon Bleu College in Culinary Arts in Portland, where Nancy began attending. The two hit it off and got together. They had a huge wedding ceremony in 1997.
So she's pushing 50 years old, and this is her first marriage?
It was. Her first and only.
Wow, interesting.
A side note about this, I did read it somewhere. I kind of don't think it's true, but they said that they weren't legally married until 2017, 2018. I thought that was strange because why go to the trouble of having this huge wedding and not making it legal? I did try and look it up through the Oregon Vital Records and Ancestry, but couldn't find anything on it.
And that's strange, especially since they were both mature adults, so why bother faking it?
I don't know, maybe they're trying to keep it saucy and say they were married, not be married. Who knows?
Yeah. Weird, especially for, back then people were definitely more open to people just living together.
Mm-hmm. Daniel continued to teach and Nancy ran a catering company. But after more than a decade at the catering company, Nancy left and wanted to follow her true passion of storytelling in fiction and joined her local chapter of Romance Writers of America. In 2011, Nancy wrote a blog titled How to Murder Your Husband. It is divided into categories listing the pros and cons of killing your nefarious husband. In her list of categories, she has a method lineup. The methods include guns, despite being loud, knives, but too messy, and poison, which seems to be her favorite.
Yeah, that would be my murder weapon of choice, too.
Okay, remind me to be suspicious if you ever offer to cook for me.
Oh, please, you wouldn't be able to not indulge in whatever I cook for you. I'm an awesome cook. Poison and all.
I didn't say you weren't awesome, but...
If I haven't killed you by now, okay?
There's still time. She gave a multitude of motives like getting revenge for cheating spouse, financial troubles, abuse, or falling in love with another person. In this blog, she also says that the prime suspect is generally always going to be the spouse, especially if there's a large financial payout.
Well, why even bother if there isn't a huge payout?
Okay, well, you're not in my will, so I think I'm safe now. Nancy's next book was in 2014. That wasn't a romance novel, but a book called Plotting Your Story Arc, Workbook for Fiction Writers. This was particularly interesting as it was a constant source of rejection in the movie. Altogether, she had 10 books published, including 6 books from the Wrong, Never Felt So Right series. This see, I just said it and you laughed. This made me laugh because all the books were titled The Wrong and then fill in the blank. So The Wrong Cop, The Wrong Brother, The Wrong Lover, Hero, and so on. A little cheesy if you ask me. Did you ever read any romance novels?
Oh, I always loved to read. And yes, I read those ridiculous Fabio on the cover romances from back in the day. But my first choice was always true crime, of course.
Of course. I was a huge Jackie Collins fan, and I thought they were so naughty. Everything so far is true about Daniel Brophy and Nancy Crampton Brody. And this is where we start the movie. Like the movie says in the beginning, it is based on true events, but dramatized. You know, making the Hollywood magic.
Mm-hmm.
There are moments that are accurate, and I'll be sure to let you know the absurdity of the real story. There's also more to the story that is in the movie that I have not included because I kind of really wanted to focus on Nancy and Daniel's life alone. The very first scene is a murder of Daniel Brophy and shows Nancy implicated as the killer. The overview of their life and what got them to this point is next on the agenda. Nancy's life consists of 3 parts. First, her passion for writing, which she loves and is the center of everything. She has regular meetings with her Romance Writers Association, where they read excerpts from the books they are currently writing to obtain constructive criticism from the other members. Second is Daniel. They really do seem to love each other, and it appears as they have a very active bedroom life. But she is very disappointed with him because she wants an extravagant lifestyle that includes travel all over the world, leaving financial issues and troubles with the house behind. Third is their finances. Daniel has this "it will work out" attitude, but they are in a huge financial hole. Every day, it seems they receive more mail with past due notices and phone calls from collectors. But during all these financial woes, Nancy has multiple life insurance policies on Daniel. There's actually one scene where she brings home a policy for him to sign, claiming these policies are an investment value, better than the stock market. He tells her, "But I have to die to have them pay out." She looks at him sweetly and says, "Don't you want me to be taken care of?" He signed the policy.
Sucker.
So pause for a true fact about this. They did have financial problems, but still managed to pay over $1,000 a month for life insurance premiums.
Well, look at Nancy having her priorities lined up for the big payout. You go, girl.
Daniel is portrayed as a very sweet, simple, ready-to-please kind of guy. Loves spending time with his family, including a son from a prior marriage, his wife and daughter. He actually does have a son. His name is Nathaniel. Daniel absolutely loves his job at the culinary school and is blissfully happy. He has a chicken coop and a rooster that he carries around and talks to. True fact. His son even referred to his chickens as his buddies.
That would have been a much better plot for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
There is a picture of the real-life Daniel holding this rooster.
We should post that one for sure.
Throughout the movie, as things keep happening and their circumstances do not improve, Nancy narrates the steps of how to murder your husband. In an effort to get her book published, she sends the manuscript to a variety of romance publishers, including going to a seminar with a speaker who is the owner of a publishing firm. After the seminar, Nancy follows her to her car and talks her into taking her book to read. She ends up obsessively calling this poor woman's firm multiple times, wanting to see what she thought of her book, even yelling at the receptionist. Eventually, the woman tells Nancy the same thing that all the other publishers tell her, that her plots are weak and problematic, that her characters don't really do anything. Every time something bad happens, she gets on her computer and concocts either another way to get money, the next step as to what she might want to do, or a place she wants to travel. Their financial situation keeps getting worse. Daniel blames part of their debt on Nancy and her use of credit cards. Nancy is very jealous of the fact that Daniel does what he loves, but she can't get her book published. Looking for help wherever she can get it, she goes into the garden and on her knees was praying for help. I thought it seemed a little bit of a guilt trip towards Daniel.
And I wonder who exactly is this murder-plotting vixen praying to?
During the whole praying scene, she's kind of mumbling, but I guess you assume she's praying to God.
But for what?
Help. I don't know. She's in the garden. Maybe she's looking for a money tree. I don't know.
A money tree or a way to murder her husband?
Daniel walks up and they have a conversation where Nancy wants him to work as a private chef. I guess this has been an option, but he doesn't want to do it because he says he'd be at their beck and call. Plus, they don't appreciate his food. He loves teaching, but says he'll take another job at night to help supplement their income. He actually does do that in real life. He has 2 jobs.
Wow. Sounds like this guy's really trying hard to keep his wife happy.
He is portrayed that way in the movie. to a T.
Wow, poor guy.
Daniel loved Nancy and wanted to make her happy. He was willing to do what she asked. All Nancy wanted to do was write. Well, up until she had to get a job to help support them.
So wait a second. All this time she doesn't have a paying job?
No, not in the movie. In real life, she does make some money with her books, though.
Other than that, she's just a wannabe writer diva sitting around complaining.
Pretty much.
Wow.
Still doing catering out of their home, a job came up for a wedding. In preparation, they purchased the food. Nancy complained because Daniel got a few items that were a little more expensive. But a short time later, Nancy had gotten a call that someone was backing out of the wedding and they requested their deposit back. I thought the deposits were non-refundable, especially in instances where supplies had to be bought.
Well, I would think that's definitely how it should go.
I actually thought that's the way it was. Nancy goes to tell Daniel that they won't make payroll if they have to return the deposit, and the bank was telling them to liquidate. He tells her that they could downsize, and Nancy retorts, I don't want to downsize. I want to upsize and travel and drink rosé on the beach. I want a big, juicy, exciting life. He said his life with her was all the juicy, exciting life he needed.
Aw, this guy really does sound like he's just awesome.
Still trying to figure out how to get out from under financial problems, Nancy visits her insurance guy, asking to cash out a life insurance policy. He explains to her she was only going to get a couple $1,000s after fees and penalties, but then graciously offers her a job. She looked around in the office and said, no, thank you.
Wow.
It was all the partitions, I think, that she was not pleased with.
I think it might have been the showing up every day part.
Trying to keep up appearances, Nancy then takes a trip with her Romance Writer Association friends to Las Vegas for a writers' conference. During dinner, she tries to use multiple credit cards that don't go through, so her friend has to pay for her, who she is internally competing with. Now we see where the credit card debt comes in.
Okay, she's ridiculously irresponsible. She's trying to spend money they don't have. And why is she in Vegas? This sounds like a group she just hangs with.
It was trying to keep up appearances. They kind of said, well, you're going, aren't you? And she wants everybody to think she has this fabulous life.
Wow.
Nancy is starting to get to her tipping point and becomes obsessed with Portugal and traveling. So in an effort to try and make her happy, one Christmas, Daniel says he has a surprise for her, and it's tickets to Portugal. I swear this is the first time I saw her smile in the entire movie. He leaves the room and comes back with Portuguese sausage and a story about why they are called links. He was all excited to tell her this. He tells her it's a taste of Lisbon without the jet lag. Then he says he'll fry them up before he leaves for work. Literally, if looks could kill.
Okay, this was not Daniel's smartest moment, but I love this. That's what her selfish self gets.
He was trying to be sweet, and she's like, are you flippin' kidding me? Nancy is at her association meeting, and someone says, does anybody have any exciting news? Before anyone else can answer, Nancy does. Nancy pipes up and starts talking about her online book and reviews and how exciting. The lady that asked the original question about the exciting news stops Nancy in mid-sentence and asks another writer, so what's your exciting news? The writer begins to tell everyone about the big new book deal she's getting, all the endorsements, and all the money she's going to get. Now, this is the same writer that paid Nancy's dinner bill in Vegas, so you know it's eating her up.
So instead of being grateful for her friend helping her out, she's dying with jealousy.
She's staring at this woman the whole time, and Nancy has a glass in her hand, and the more the lady talks, the angrier Nancy gets. She ends up squeezing this glass so hard that she broke it and sliced her hand. It was one of those thicker glasses, so I don't know how that happened. I thought it was a little extreme, but now her hand's bleeding.
Okay, I take back anything I ever agreed with her on. She's completely cray-cray.
In this movie, saying she's cray-cray is actually nice. She looks possessed half the time. Later, she's in the kitchen, bandaging up her hand when Daniel comes in. Of course, he asks about her hand, and she blows it off and wants to talk about selling the house. Daniel agrees, so Nancy starts talking about the money and traveling and living an extravagant lifestyle. Daniel says, no, we could get a tiny house, stay in the foothills, and have a little garden. Then he goes to grab a brochure of a 450 square foot tiny home. Now, you could only imagine how well this went over. Again, Nancy goes upstairs, gets on her computer, and starts looking up untraceable guns.
These two are living in extremely different worlds, aren't they?
She wanted to take the money and just go international and see all the things she wanted to see. I don't know what was going to happen when the money ran out, but that's what her idea was. And he's like, oh, we can pay off everything and just live in this cute little tiny house. She goes, I can't even stand in that thing. She purchases what they call a ghost gun, which I've never heard of before, but it's a gun that you build yourself. Making numerous attempts to assemble the gun, Nancy gets frustrated and tosses everything aside. This forces her to come up with another plan, and she ends up in a gun store.
So I actually have heard of a ghost gun. Unfortunately, it's what some of our crazy active shooters make when they need a gun and they need to get around the background check requirement. So this is never a good thing.
I can't believe that's actually a thing or an option. While talking to the clerk at the gun store, Nancy is telling her she's a romance writer and she's buying the gun as research for one of her stories so that her facts can be accurate when she talks about it. Nancy asks, for the sake of accuracy, if you clean a gun, does it still show that it has been fired? The clerk tells her yes, but a workaround is if you can get the identical slide and barrel for the Glock that she's looking at. After you fire it, you replace the slide and barrel. It will be clean and not fired. Nancy's next stop, you guessed it, her computer. She searches on eBay for the Glock 17 replacement slide and barrel. Lo and behold, she finds it and purchases it. To try and hide the evidence, she deletes her account because we know that makes it go away.
Oh, but of course it does. Hello.
Now in her office, trying to change the Glock part, she can't figure it out. And what do we all do when we need to figure something out because we know reading the instructions isn't an option?
I YouTube everything.
Exactly. We look for a video on how to do it. And the next thing you know, she's out in some wooded area shooting the gun and replacing the slide like a pro. So at this point in the movie, continuing with the narration, she talks about doing a trial run. Following Daniel from the produce market to the school and going in to see how hard it would be to sneak in. Nancy walks up to Daniel, scaring him because he's not paying attention, and tells him she's on her way to a meeting and had to use the restroom, so she stopped by. Plus, to work on her story, she says this is such a bad area and anyone can walk in off the street. I think that's foreshadowing, if you ask me.
But I wonder why she would say that to him when he's the intended target. Who's he going to tell?
She's doing the whole scenario in her head. That was just my opinion.
I know, makes no sense. She's talking to the victim.
On June 2nd, 2018, Nancy goes to the culinary school where Daniel is already there setting up for the day. She gives him some reason why she's there and tells him to continue with what he's doing. He turns around to finish setting up, then bam, she shoots him in the back. He falls to the floor, landing on his back, and blood begins to pool underneath him. The shot paralyzes him. Nancy walks to his side. He looks at her like, why? She points the gun as he turns his head. She shoots him again, killing him. On her way home, she stops by what I'm guessing is a lake or a pond, changes the slide, throws it in the water, and heads home and waits for phone calls. In the movie and in real life, his students found him. They came for the day to do their work. I can only imagine it was very traumatic for them. After investigating, they found there were no signs of forced entry or a struggle. He still had his wallet, cell phone, and car keys, which meant no robbery.
She was so busy with perfecting the kill that she forgot to set up a motive. I mean, come on, that's murder 101.
It's funny that you say that because the main reason, at least in the movie, that her books weren't being published was because her plots were weak and problematic.
I can see why.
You may wonder about cameras in the school, but during her recon, she asked him if the school had cameras, and he said no. This whole movie goes back and forth between June 2nd, 2018, and flashbacks of their past. During the interview after the shooting, police officers asked Nancy if she owned a gun. She happily pipes up and says yes, that she purchased it after the Florida shootings for protection. They ask her when exactly did she buy it. She said around Christmas time. They both pause and look at each other and say, the Florida shootings? They were in February. Right on cue, Nancy tells them, oh, you know, all those shootings. She then asks if they want to see it. A little while later, a detective goes to pick up the gun from Nancy when he gets a phone call asking him to take pictures of her van. They located camera footage from a pizza place across the street showing Nancy's van coming and going between the time of Daniel's murder. The irony was that they really did catch her van on the camera in real life. She originally told the police she was in bed at the time of Daniel's murder.
Oh, Nancy, again, it really is no mystery why your stories didn't sell.
In the movie, at least. The detectives take the pictures and the evidence they have so far to the DA asking about pressing charges, but the DA says that it's not enough. They need more evidence. Nancy's dream of selling her house can now be fulfilled. The only problem is they have to do repairs before the house can go on the market. The real estate agent tells her that in selling your house, you have to be patient. But patience is the one thing that Nancy does not have. She again goes to her computer, looking at top 10 places to travel solo and extradition from Portugal. Daniel's parents, Jack and Karen Brophy, were interviewed by Portland Channel 6 News during the trial. They said Nancy wasted no time once Daniel died getting the house ready to sell. Nancy had called them over to help them clear out the garage, and I quote, "We went over fairly quick because Nancy was sort of pushing to sell the house," said Jack Brophy. Karen had also followed this up with, "The chickens had just disappeared."
Oh my goodness, she went all Cruella de Vil on his chicken buddies?
Well, in the movie, she had Nathaniel, Daniel's son, come and just take the chickens immediately. So I don't know what happened in real life, but in the movie, the son took them.
I went to worst case scenario, of course.
Poor little chicken corpses.
She's wearing a chicken suit made out of them.
Sometimes I have no words. Oh my gosh. So just a little side note. This was part of the movie that I did not include. Nancy had a brother who had cancer and he was dying. He was married and she went to visit him at one point to get money from him. The other two scenes with him, he's on FaceTime. He passes away. She goes to Texas for his funeral. There's a scene where she is in the judge's chambers with her brother's wife. And on his desk, he has two wills. One normal size, an inch thick will, and the other one just pages. And the judge says, I have two wills in front of me. I have to determine which will I'm going to uphold. So he says, in this, and he goes to the one that's the thicker one, says it has all the verbiage of a will. Everything in it goes to his wife. And this one was done 2 years before he passed away. Now he goes to the smaller one that was done 2 days before he passed away, actually makes fun of it because the verbiage isn't correct, and says everything goes to Nancy, his sister, and nothing goes to his wife. And I honestly don't know if any of this is true. I thought it was kind of funny. But who does that?
This woman has no shame. I mean, that is the most ridiculous thing ever.
It was crazy. Nancy is busy trying to make things happen and calls investigators to ask if she could come in and speak to them. During the recorded meeting, she asked if they could provide her with a letter stating that she was not a suspect. She says, quote, "They don't want to pay if it turns out that I secretly went down to the school and shot my husband," end quote. They did actually play that in court during the trial.
And by her saying that, it's not so secretly anymore, Nancy. I have no words.
She's an interesting bundle, isn't she?
She sure is. She's got gonads. I'll give her that.
The movie continues with her telling the officers it wasn't a big policy, but she just didn't want it to take forever. She tells them it's only $40,000. The officers go back to the DA with this information. The DA asks if it was $40,000. They said they did some digging and it was more like $1.5 million with all the policies. And in actuality, she did have policies. They were anywhere from $1.4 to $1.5 million on Daniel.
And that's why I won't let my husband have a big policy on me. True story. I ain't no fool.
No, that's the movie version. He's got some big ass policies on you.
Right, I just don't know it.
Right. So now we go back to reality. Nancy Brophy was arrested September 6, 2018. They began the trial on April 4th, 2022, 4 years later. Nancy pleaded not guilty, and her defense team insisted that there was no motive. Prosecution claimed that the motive for the murder was money. Isn't it always? The first order of business was her blog, How to Murder Your Husband, that was written in 2011. Prosecution wanted the blog in the trial as evidence, claiming she laid out pointers on how to kill her husband. However, the judge would not let it be entered in, stating, quote, "The post was old, that it was written for a writing seminar, and any value it might have was outweighed by the prejudice it might cause in the jury," end quote. I get how it might have swayed the jury, but it also showed that she'd been thinking about it. I mean, all the things she could have written about, she had to write about that.
Yeah, and I'm not blaming Daniel, but he should have been looking over his shoulder after her starting this blog. And it also makes me wonder if that's why they legally got married much later on, because she needed to legally be his wife to collect on these policies.
Possibly. But I will say, at least in the movie, he was very happy with her writing. He at one point tells her that he loved her writing. Why don't you just write it for me and you? There is a scene where they're in the bedroom and they called it proofreading. He was reading her story, rubbing her arm. They're sitting next to each other. It was this whole like mini erotic thing. It was, it was like, okay, this is a little on the creepy side, but you know what? You do you guys.
And Daniel must have liked to live on the edge then. Yeah, when my husband wants to start reading about how he's going to kill me, that's definitely my sign.
During the trial, one of Nancy's alibis was brought up. She said she was in bed when Daniel was shot, but remember the videos of the van going back and forth around the time he was murdered? When questioned about it, Nancy said she had, are you ready for it?
Hit it.
A memory hole.
That sounds dirty.
Oh, it gets better. As she remembers none of it, she thought she might have gone to Starbucks to work on one of her novels. Oh, but there's more. A psychologist for the defense team testified that trauma can affect memory. Maybe, but I pretty much call it selective memory or flat out lying to cover her tracks.
Absolutely.
You want more bizarre?
Let's keep going. Nancy never fails.
She should write this.
This would have been her best story yet.
Right. Nancy's cellmate also testified, but for the prosecution, saying that while having a conversation with Nancy, she slipped up and said, "I," when talking about how her husband was murdered. This case wasn't built around photographs and text messages. It was built entirely around internet evidence, said Portland Police Bureau Officer Aaron Sparling. Quote, "It's all search history. I can't recall a single other case in my tenure that was built off of internet-related evidence." End quote. Sparling searched 2 of Nancy's computer's internet history, looking for keywords such as handgun, gun, Glock, and murder. You know, kind of like what we do when we're searching for podcasts and ideas.
Yep.
He got nothing, but there was a third laptop that he searched for, and voila! He went through her history and started a timeline of when she was looking things up. During the search, Nancy had been looking up where to buy ghost gun kits. Sparling found out that between November 2017 and March 2018, she purchased the ghost gun kit. Our friend Nancy had also been looking up if Glock pistols have a kickback, videos on ghost guns, how to buy a gun locally, when do you register a gun in Oregon, and the Portland Expo Gun Show 2018. The gun that was seized by police was bought at the expo.
She should have just put up a neon sign. Look here, look here.
And if that wasn't enough, her internet history showed that she was an eBay buyer. She won an auction for a Glock slide and barrel. Quoting Sparling, "It's not totally out of the norm to look up a Glock 17 purchase, but when you break it down to a slide and barrel, well, that's a little more interesting."
That's definitely the nail in the coffin.
Oh, there's so many nails.
There really is.
Since Nancy didn't know anything about clearing her internet history, apparently, searches for videos about loading a 9mm Glock and how to assemble, disassemble, and clean a Glock 17 popped up. Okay, had to actually look to see if you could purchase some of these things if they were on eBay. And you actually can. Now I've got to clear my internet history.
Or just use a different weapon.
The ghost gun kit and Glock were seized by the police. During cross-examination, Nancy admitted to taking the Glock apart and reassembling it, along with purchasing the extra slide and barrel. However, that part was never found. Nancy's reason, and you're going to love this, because they had been lost in a closet.
Oh no, not the old closet black hole alibi.
She's a holy person. Memory hole, closet black hole.
Hole in her husband's head.
Technically, it was his back and his chest, but okay, I know where you're going with that. Forensic investigators determined that Daniel Brophy was shot with a Glock 17 9mm. Nancy's defense attorney argued that the gun was purchased as a prop for research for her books. And I quote, "To support her writing, Miss Brophy has spent good money on night vision goggles, a telescope, law enforcement quality handcuffs, high-powered binoculars, antique glass doorknobs, and lots of blocks." End quote. The attorney also called 2 other writer witnesses, one of whom had a giant crossbow and the other one that had bought a chastity belt to use for research.
We need to become writers so that we can justify our bizarre purchases. Wink, wink.
As far as their finances, they did have struggles. They took out a $35,000 payment from Daniel's retirement to pay off bills and catch up. Nancy testified that things would be better if Daniel was still alive, especially since they did cash in their retirement and they were planning to downsize. This is where the defense came up with the robbery gone wrong theory. Nancy Crampton Brody was found guilty on June 13, 2022. She was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. She is currently in Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in Oregon and is 73 years old. Daniel is remembered by his students as an inspiring instructor, having a wonderful sense of humor who helped to shape their careers. Brophy wrote in her How to Murder Your Husband blog, quote, "As a romantic suspense writer, I spend a lot of time thinking about murder and consequently about police procedure. After all, if the murder is supposed to set you free, I certainly don't want to spend any time in jail. I find it easier to wish people dead than to actually kill them. I don't want to worry about blood and brains splattered on my walls. And really, I'm not good at remembering lies. But the thing I remember about murder is that every one of us has it in him or her when pushed far enough. End quote.
It's a crazy quote because she talks about her own shortcomings to commit murder, and yet she commits murder with a lot of shortcomings.
Well,
this is wild because I feel like we stepped into this lady's delusional brain for a few moments. It's like, this lady's out there.
I am impressed about how they do parallel quite a bit her real life versus the movie. And I do see where the exaggerations came in.
I'm all about a good exaggeration.
And this does fit into our double A month.
Yes, it does. I didn't see it, so of course I'm going off of what you say, but it sounds interesting enough that I might have to actually go back and watch a movie now.
And just to see Sybil Shepherd's face through this whole movie. Seriously.
Right? What's up with her face? Wasn't she a model or something back in the day?
She was.
I don't get it. Sorry, Sybil. Not trying to slam you, but she brought it up. All right. Well, thank you for that bizarre and asinine and absurd story.
Well, you are absolutely welcome.
We want to thank you all for listening. Don't forget to have fun, take care, and let your grimaginations run wild. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
We just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us. And if you'd like to send in your creepy little grim bits, we would love to hear your personal stories, interests, and suggestions. Please email them to grimwitwithdimwits@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at grimwitwithdimwits, Twitter at grimwitwithdimwits, and Facebook, Grimwit with Dimwits. Join us every Monday for new episodes and feel free to share us with your grim-loving friends.
We would really appreciate if you would take a minute to rate and review. 5-star ratings go a long way and would really help us out. Until then, we would love it if you'd come back next week to delve with us into the strange and unusual things we just can't wrap our skulls around.